That's why actually I try to hang out with other business owners and not just real estate agents. Yeah.
You get the best ideas.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. Hi, this is Jordan Hill with Dirt to Sky Business Podcast, and I would like to thank SMI Real Estate and Clutch Industries for sponsoring this episode. I am so excited to be here today with Ellen Yin. How are you?
Jordan, I'm so thrilled to be here. You know I love a good yap with a friend.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. I've known you for several years now, and I am just always in awe of everything that you do.
Thank you.
And I'm just really excited you took time out of your day.
I couldn't think of a better way to kick off my week. Honestly, we were chatting in the pre-recording, right? That I have not had the most productive Monday, but this is a great way to wrap my day.
Good, that's right.
Just like being real here. Not every day is, spot on.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Yes. All entrepreneurs can relate.
I love it. All right. So you are the founder and CEO of Cubicle to CEO. I would love for you to kind of talk about your journey and how you started it and what Cubicle to CEO is.
Yeah. So Cubicle to CEO is kind of a cheeky reference to my own journey as an entrepreneur, working in a corporate cubicle and then quitting within 10 months. That was my first and last corporate job, as I call it. I was 23 when I quit. I remember clearly it was a couple days before Christmas. I had nothing lined up, no job interviews, no prospects. And I just knew that where I wasn't the right fit for me. I worked in a really restrictive industry. It was health insurance. So I'm a very creative mind, and I felt very stifled in that role. And so I knew staying longer wouldn't necessarily change that. So I decided to take a leap of faith. And luckily I had saved up and had made certain decisions in my college years that allowed me to take a bigger risk and have that kind of foundation to fall back on. So quit my job without a backup plan. And I actually never intended to start a business, Jordan, which is kind of, a funny way that I ended up here. I always call myself an accidental entrepreneur because when I first quit my job, I was working in marketing in the corporate world. And I thought, I'll just go to a bigger market like Portland and see if I can find a better fit marketing position. Yeah. But during that interim, I actually hurt my back the month after I quit. So I was bedridden for about 3 weeks or so. And then as I was, putting out job applications, I actually reconnected, I should say, with a colleague of mine that I had worked with at my corporate job. And him and his wife owned these 2 local coffee stands, and they were wanting to kind of build a bigger presence on Instagram. And so we reconnected, and I said, hey, could I give it a go? Could I, come out with my camera, take some content for you, help you launch your Instagram accounts, and you can pay me $300 a month. It was not, it was not a life-changing amount of money. But what was so cool was when they took a chance on me and gave me that project, it wasn't so much that $300 was enough for me to, live off of, obviously, but it gave me the self-belief that I had skills that could be monetized outside of a traditional job. So I decided right then and there, I was like, you know what, I'm going to put a pause on applying for new jobs. I'm going to see if I can go out and get more clients and see where this leads me. And, that was back in 2018. I have not had a social media agency or run that business model now for 5 years. So it's, my business has shifted a lot. We can talk about that, but that's what kind of launched me into the space.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. So starting at $300 and you just worked your way from the ground up.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about where Cubicle to CEO is now.
Yeah. So Cubicle to CEO nowadays is a media and education platform. So we're best known for our podcast, Cubicle to CEO. Yes. We're a top business podcast. We have over 1 million downloads worldwide. We have listeners in over 200 countries and territories around the world. So we've really built up a global listenership in the business space. And our education platform, we have courses and live events, both virtual and upcoming in person, that really support mostly women entrepreneurs. I mean, we're for every, we're able to support all types of entrepreneurs, but we're really especially focused on elevating women and advancing, our economic opportunities through small business ownership.
Yeah. Wow. So and I have a few more questions, starting from there, but I would be very interested to know for anybody that is starting, that's listening, that's about to launch their own business or become an entrepreneur for the first time. What is an obstacle or just something that you learned as you were making that shift from job to being an entrepreneur?
I think that you have to create your own opportunities. A lot of being in a W-2 job is you have the privilege in some senses of being able to fall back on systems and team and resources and some sort of path that's already been laid before you, right? It's like, unless you're coming into a brand new job or a brand new startup, typically you are replacing another person's role or maybe someone who's, evolved on up from there. And so you typically have some sort of roadmap. As an entrepreneur, you can borrow other people's lessons, right, that they've learned through business, but a lot of it has to do with you seeing an opportunity and being willing to make the ask and being willing and able to experiment. I think that's a huge thing when you're looking at entrepreneurs who are successful versus those who are not. The ones who have an extreme bias toward action and are very quick to take action and utilize the lessons they learn to then iterate and then continue to refine their process go a lot farther than the people who sit and just try to plan steps A through Z because they want to do it perfect the first round. Unfortunately, there is no perfect path. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is from this poet. His name is Antonio Machado. And it goes, "Traveler, there is no path. The path is made by walking." And I so believe in the truth of that. Like, you cannot sit or stand from where you are with the limited experience or worldviews that you have, maybe from only working in a W-2 job, and expect to be able to plan your path as a business owner. You really have to be able to say, okay, maybe I only see step A and I have no idea what's beyond that, but I'm going to take that first step, try something, test something, and then see what works and leave behind what didn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is maybe an example or a story that you have when you were blazing your own trail and learned a lesson, or, it was something that you had to overcome and maybe fail at that now, of course, if you learn from it, it's a success. Because I think when we look at you, we do see all of the success.
Thank you.
But I'm sure, behind the scenes, there were lessons learned.
So many. I mean, we could be here for hours just talking about all of the things that did not go the way I hoped or had planned for them to go. One early, I think, example of this was when I was making the transition from that done for you services agency model where we were, working behind the scenes of people's marketing accounts to when we transitioned fully into an education company and then eventually also into media. I remember at the time, most of our revenue came from one-on-one clients. And I really, really wanted to move into the education space where we could create courses and programs and experiences for people to help them build their small businesses. And I remember one of my first mini products that I had tried to create was this course called #Hacks, which actually has been retired for a number of years now. But at the time, hashtags were a really big deal on Instagram for visibility and reach, right? And this was around end of 2019. And I remember when I first tried to sell that product, I can't even remember the exact number of people, but it was like a very small handful of people who joined that product. And I could have easily looked at that and said, oh, well, that was a big flop. Like I tried to market it, I tried to put it out there and not a lot of people were joining. And then when I went back to the drawing board and figured out, okay, I have to be able to solve a pertinent question, because ultimately all products are a solution to a big question, right? And so the way that I was trying to market it previously wasn't working because I didn't even fully understand the question I was trying to solve for somebody. And then I landed on, what if you could reach thousands of people on Instagram every time you post, even if you have a small audience? It's kind of this like curiosity inducing question, right? And it immediately creates this kind of this gap to give somebody a solution for that. And so I actually built out my first funnel from that product. And, that product went on to enroll almost 9,000 students from all across the world.
Gosh.
And if I had given up that first shot at it, right, it never would have seen its full potential.
Yeah, that's really inspiring.
Thank
because I know from experience, and probably everybody listening, we have had those flops, and it can feel discouraging. And so being able to hear you talk about the fact that you took that, you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep going. And you pivoted. So
100%. And I think for every business, right, we all have such different businesses. I'm sure a lot of the people who sat in this chair, you've gotten to interview people from all sorts of industries, which is so cool. And you're in real estate and I'm in media and education. But I think at the end of the day, sometimes we overcomplicate business. And when you really distill it into its most basic parts, all businesses need traffic. In other words, people need to know that you exist, that your business or your products or your services exist, right? So you need traffic/visibility. You need some form of lead generation. So how do you capture attention and turn it into some owned form of contact that you can then remarket to your potential clients or customers? And then you need some way to convert leads into sales, right? Some sort of sales generation, sales acquisition process. And so when you really think about business in just those three simple levers, you can look at any problem and ask yourself, is this a traffic problem? Is this a lead problem? Or is this a sales problem? Because sometimes we look at something and we say, this product is a fail, or this service is a fail, or whatever it is. When in reality, it's like maybe just one of those three levers isn't quite firing. Maybe you realize that every single person you actually get on a call with converts. So you're like, great, I don't have a conversion problem, but maybe you only ever get on calls with 3 people a month. At that point, you can say, I have a traffic or a lead generation problem. I need to focus on solutions to the right problem. And if you know the problem you're trying to solve, you can find a better solution than just making a blanket statement like, oh, this isn't working.
Wow. Yeah. That's so true. I love that. So how would you identify which of those three was the problem, and how would you bridge that gap?
A lot of business comes down to math. And I know that sounds scary for a lot of people because they're like, oh, I hate math. And trust me, I did too. It was the bane of my existence growing up. Yeah. But luckily, entrepreneur math is fun because I call it money math, right? Who doesn't like to make money? Yeah. So really a lot of business is just looking at data and what the numbers tell you. So for example, I actually have a free worksheet on my website. If you go to cubicletoceo.co, it's called 10K month roadmap. Even if you're a business that has far exceeded $10,000 a month in revenue, I think sometimes it helps just to go back to the basics and figure out like, what is your magic number? And the magic number that I'm talking about is how many leads you would need a month to reach your target revenue goal, whatever that may look like. And so you can break anything down into a simple equation, right? So for example, if you are noticing, let's say that you have some sort of, because you're in a service-based business, I'm just going to use you as an example. Let's say that business is slow for you and you're trying to figure out, what is the issue? Is it that I have a traffic issue, I have a leads issue, or I have a sales issue? You might look at on the back end of wherever your website is hosted. And let's say that you have a page on your website where someone can fill out a contact form if they're interested in having a potential discovery call with you to see if you're the right agent for them, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you look on the back end and you notice that you have 500 page views a month. Okay, that's pretty great for like a localized business, right? But then let's say of those 500 page views, you're getting 4 people to fill out a form a month. So if you do some simple math there, 4 divided by 500, you're able to quickly discover what is the percentage conversion from a page view to a lead captured. And you'll notice it's quite low, right? For 500 page views, you would expect that, let's say you even have like a 10% conversion there. You would expect that if 500 people land on that page, probably 50 people might be filling out that form. But if 3 people are filling out that form or 5 people are filling out that form, you might go, what is it about this page that's not you're capturing someone's attention, but once you have their attention, they don't want to take the next step. So maybe you're looking at, I have a messaging problem. Like something is not clicking here where people are not seeing the next logical solution be to fill out this contact form, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, you would say, I have a lead problem. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say you have 500 page views and 50 people are filling out the form. And then you're getting on these calls or coffee chats or whatever with 50 people. And then 2 people convert.
Right.
2 divided by 50. I don't know what that quick mental math is, but it's a pretty low conversion percentage, right? And so again, in that instance, you're looking at the math and you're saying, I have a good flow of attention. I have a good flow of leads, but somewhere between the lead and the sale, something's not, again, something there's a gap there.
Yeah.
And so how do I better help someone, see our services or our team as the right fit to help them with whatever they need? And so it really just boils down to basic math and doing a good job of collecting data on those 3 stages to see where you could potentially improve.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love data too, because if you know what to do with it, that's it right there. But if you don't know the data and you don't know the numbers,
exactly,
you're just blindly, you know what I mean? Like trying to find a solution. Yeah.
Exactly. And once you know all these numbers, like if you know consistently, I have a 10% conversion from lead to sale and I have a 30% conversion from page view to lead, then your business literally just becomes math, right? If you're like, I want to make $100,000 a month and I know the average client value or purchase transaction is worth, let's say $5,000, then you're like, I need 20 clients in a month to make 100,000. And then you can just literally reverse engineer everything. You go, okay, 200 divided by my conversion rate. Now that means I need this many leads. Okay, my leads divided by my page views now, or conversion from page views to leads. Now I know how many people need to hit that page in order to get the leads I need, in order to get the conversion. So everything just becomes a simple math equation.
Wow. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched on messaging and can you go into like what that is? Because I actually learned it from, you were speaking at a live event a number of years, 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever heard about messaging, and it really, really opened my mind. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, messaging is such a huge topic, and there's so many different angles, but I think what you're referring to, Jordan, is when I was talking about stages of awareness. So a lot of people look at their content through the lens of content pillars. And typically when people are thinking about content pillars, they're thinking about topical things. Like if you're a health coach, it might be like one content pillar is recipes, one content pillar is healthy habits, one content pillar is exercise, right? Movement, whatever it is. And so people tend to look at their content through the lens of how can I kind of rotate through these content pillars, which there's nothing inherently wrong with that if your goal, let's say, is engagement or views, right? If you're just trying to capture attention and conversation and engagement, that can work quite well.
Okay.
But if you are, let's say, trying to move someone beyond just liking your post, commenting on your post, whatever, and actually move them towards some sort of action, you need to move them further down the decision funnel. And for them to do that, you have to have 3 types of content. You have to have content for people who are not problem aware, content for people who are problem aware, and then content for people who are solution aware. And just to break it down real quick, because I know in the space of a podcast, we can't dive, super meticulously into this, but just for a general sense of understanding, people who are not problem aware are people who don't even realize they have the problem that your service or your product is trying to solve for them. So no matter how amazing your product or service is, you could shout from the rooftops, give 1 million testimonials. You could be literally the #1 business in your region for X service or X product. But if they don't believe they even have the problem that your product or service solves, it will never matter. They will never make the decision to buy from you because they're not problem aware. Right. So for those types of people, you have to create content that makes them even aware that there is something missing from their lives or their business or their relationships or whatever it is that needs some sort of solution. Yeah. Then for people who are problem aware, these are people who are like, let's go back to that wellness coach example, right? These are people who may be walking around going, gosh, I just have these like last 10 stubborn pounds that I just can't get rid of, right? They realize they have this issue, but they don't know what the right solution would be to help them with this issue. So they're kind of just on this wide search of what's the best solution. Your job for those people is to help them see why your solution is the most effective way to solve that problem. And then from there, once someone knows, okay, I know now that the most effective solution is not getting on another diet, and it's actually to, let's say, learn my body's intuitive eating cycles, right? Return back to my, like, listening to my body and whatever. Yeah. Again, I'm not a health coach. I'm just making all this up. But let's say that's the example, right? So they now realize, okay, I'm now looking for someone specifically to help me develop my intuitive eating. They know that this is the solution. Now your job for those solution aware people is to help them see why your solution is the best solution out there. So now they're like, okay, I'm deciding between 5 different people who could help me with this intuitive eating. Now that's where your testimonials, your case studies, your unique process and methodology, can really shine and say, okay, I know you could potentially get help from these people, but here's why I am the best intuitive eating coach out there. Do you see kind of how you move them through those stages of progression?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I would be interested on what experience you have or advice that you would have on niching down your target audience when you are messaging. Yeah. Do you find that it's more effective to cast a wide net or to truly like niche down to that exact person?
It totally depends on the goal with your business. But I would say if you are wanting to niche down, a lot of times people niche down from the perspective of demographics or I would say actually demographics are the biggest thing. People will say like, oh, my niche audience is women or my niche audience is moms or parents or, dog owners who live in Salem, Oregon or, whatever. Yeah. And for some businesses that can work if you're super localized business. Okay. Like if you're like a local restaurant, you could be, maybe your target market is, we're the best restaurant for people who love Mexican food in Salem, right?
Right.
That makes sense. But for a lot of us businesses, we're able to serve clients and customers from all around the world. Like we have customers all over the United States, all over the world. And it doesn't really make sense for us to niche down based on demographic. What's actually more powerful than demographics are to niche down to a result. So instead of being so hyper-focused on my niche is this gender or this age group or this location, instead think through what is the outcome that someone will get from buying and using my product or hiring me for a service, and then niche down to that outcome and be the best in your category at getting them that outcome. So to give you an example of this, when I was a social media manager way back in the day, again, don't have that business anymore. So if you're listening to this, don't come hiring me for social media, but I have some great referrals for you if you are interested. Anyways, so back in the day, when I was a social media manager, if I were to go to clients and say, hey, I serve small businesses or I serve because most of the brands I worked with were like consumer brands. They were e-commerce brands that sold physical products. So if I said my niche is e-com brands, right? That is fine. Maybe that is like the typical demo of the client base that I work with. But if I go to a client like that and I say, hey, as a social media manager, I can create, 5 posts a week for you. I can manage your accounts. I can respond to your comments. I can, create the content for you, direct your strategy. Those things are all true, but they're all very commoditized, right? That's not strong messaging because you are essentially turning your service into a commodity where they can go, okay, you can do those things, but there's also 10,000 other social media managers that can also do those exact same things.
Right.
So how you stand apart with your messaging is you look at the outcome. You're like, okay, if somebody hires me to post for them 5 days a week, what exactly is it that they want from these posts? What do they want these posts to do for their business? I knew for my clients, they wanted social to be a huge driver of clicks and new traffic to their website. So how I would go out with my messaging is say, if you hire me as your social media manager, I will turn Instagram into your #1 traffic driver. It will beat the amount of traffic you get from Google search, from your paid ads, from referrals, from any other source. Instagram will be your #1 traffic driver. Do you see how clear and specific and outcomes oriented that is?
Yes.
That makes it much harder for somebody else to go out and hire Joe Schmo for the same social media services because they see that and they go, I've got to work with this agency or this team because they know how to drive that outcome.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I love that. So niche down into the outcome. Yeah. I think that's so valuable. Thank you for breaking that down.
Of course.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Now, you are no longer doing social media management, of course. Yeah. And I'm curious what your next step was. Was it the podcast or was it the digital marketing that you offer? Or
great question.
Kind of the next.
So I started my podcast in the summer of 2018. And it was while I was still running an agency. So I started my business early 2018, quickly grew my client portfolio. Over the 2 years that I had a boutique social media agency or worked as a social media manager, we served dozens of clients, again, mostly in the consumer brand e-commerce space. One of our biggest clients was actually the brand that essentially pioneered the cauliflower pizza crust category in grocery stores. So you remember 4 or 5 years ago when everywhere it was like cauliflower rice, cauliflower pizza, cauliflower bread. They were the ones who really pioneered that entire grocery category. So it was a wild ride. I mean, that year, especially in 2018, traveled all over the country, went to all these huge expos and shows. And it was such a cool learning experience. But towards the end of 2019, so I launched my podcast in the middle of 2019 in the summer. towards the end of 2019, I was really starting to feel this pull where I no longer wanted to spend all of my time marketing behind the scenes in other people's businesses. Like Cubicle to CEO had started to take form through the podcast. And I was like, I really feel like where I can make more impact is through mentorship and through teaching. I've always had a heart for teaching. People always say, you have a great way of being able to distill complex topics into simple to understand action steps or nuggets. And so I really wanted to lean into that. But I knew that as long as I had a full client roster, I would never be able to fully give my attention to taking things off with the business education side. And so I'm kind of a person of extremes in business. Like I will just make these radical decisions and just go for it. And so same like how I quit my job without a backup plan, right? I did another big evolution at the end of 2019 where I basically let go of all of my clients except for one client. So I basically slashed my revenue to close to zero overnight. And I said, you know what? I have to put my back against the wall because if I don't, I will always stay in my comfort zone of putting my clients' businesses before building our own brand. So I was like, I'm going to let go of all of my clients except for this one. And I'm going to give myself the next 90 days to get an evergreen funnel up and running for, at the time, what was our signature program. We had a 12-month mentorship program where we helped freelancers and service providers who work with one-on-one clients scale their own businesses to their first $10,000 a month. And so that's what I did. I spent 90 days working on creating this webinar, building out a funnel. A funnel is just a series of steps, by the way, if you're not familiar with that digital marketing term. It's just a series of steps someone takes once they enter your ecosystem. So in our case, it was watch this free 60-minute training or webinar. Then we have your email collected from that. And then we're going to send you a series of 9 to 12 follow-up emails with one specific action, which is to join our group mentorship program. So I spent 90 days getting that up and running. And then by the beginning of 2020, we had already scaled that one product to recurring $10,000 months. #Hacks launched a couple months after that. We got thousands of new students into our ecosystem through that. And since then, since 2020, we've had, I think, 14,000 people enroll in our programs from all over the world. It's so wild because I never could have imagined that, right? From the first time that I created a program, I think my very first program I ever created, I had 12 people join. And I thought, that rocked my world, Jordan. I was like, this is so cool. So I never, ever could have imagined how many more people would come through the doors in all this time. But anyway, so we continued scaling the education side of our business. And then it was early 2023 when we decided to fully shift into media. And all that means is that as a media business, our content is our primary product. So just like Salem Business Journal, actually, right? Salem Business Journal, the podcasts under this umbrella brand, the newspaper, both print and online editions, those are all content products that are free for consumers to read or to listen to or to watch, but the revenue model is supported by sponsorships and paid partners. And so similar idea, our podcast now is our front-facing product, even though it's free for our listeners, obviously, to listen every Monday. And then we also have a newsletter called the CEO Stand-Up that goes out every Wednesday. And what I love is that we get to peek behind the scenes of so many different types of businesses, just like you do. And we're really known for financially transparent content. So we feature a case study every single week on our podcast and in our newsletter where we really grill like a founder on what is one specific growth strategy you've implemented in your business. And it has to have either grown their audience, grown their team, grown their revenue/profit, or grown their time. So it's like one of those 4 categories. Then we deep dive into what exactly did you do? How did you execute the strategy? What did it cost you to do? What did you make from this? So people are very open and they actually give us access to like their behind the scenes data, their books, their revenue, their profit margins. And we get to share all of this with our community, which is so cool because I think that the more we are open in talking about money, the more we all win. So that's kind of what we do nowadays in our business.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. I saw on the website, which I hope everybody goes to visit because it's amazing. But you have an amazing selection of the business education products.
Thank you.
And one that caught my eye today was talking about the power of being a guest on others' podcasts. And I told you before the show, I'm going to be buying that today.
Well,
because
thanks.
I am new in the podcast world, and so I'm learning about it all. And podcasts I'm seeing more and more entrepreneurs entrepreneurs either, try to be on them or start their own. It's definitely going strong. And so I'd be interested in kind of what that, that course is about and why somebody would buy it.
Absolutely. Well, the best part of it, so the product you're referring to is Perfect Podcast Pitch.
Yes.
The best part of it is it's not a course, it's a template. So it means that you don't have to sit through hours of content. You can buy that product and literally have your first podcast pitch sent out within 15 minutes of buying the product.
Wow.
And we have so many students who do exactly that. We actually just got a DM the other day from someone who's like, I have procrastinated for years on trying to guest on other people's podcasts because I always get in my head about what am I going to say? How am I going to pitch myself? Like, why would anyone choose me to be their guest? They downloaded this product, wrote their pitch with our template, sent it out, and literally the first pitch they sent out, they booked a show. And they were interviewed like the next, week or whatnot. So it really is so incredible because podcast guesting is such low-hanging fruit to get visibility in front of other people's audiences. And as a business, the only way to really grow if you have a small community or small audience or small customer base is to borrow other people's audiences and to get in front of new people, right, who don't know you, who aren't familiar with your brand, but you have a trusted kind of interim, like someone who discovers me for the first time today. They already know and love you, Jordan. They already know and love Salem Business Journal. So that type of person discovering me is very different than a random person Googling and then coming up and finding Cubicle the CEO, right?
Right.
So it's a very powerful form of visibility for a business. And once you master the art of pitching for podcasts, you can translate that skill into pitching for bigger media, for TV, for newspapers, magazines. Like I've taken that same skill, and that's how I got a recurring guest spot on a, ABC affiliate station in Portland, where I was going up once a month, and they're like business expert. And that was all from the same skills of knowing how to pitch media. So I think it's such a powerful skill that everybody should learn. I'm happy to dive deeper if you want to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm really excited to check out that template. And that is such an untapped source of getting your business name out there that I haven't thought about it. And I know so many that the doing Instagram collaborations is like a little baby version of that.
Yeah,
which it's great once us as business owners, we get the hang of that. And that's pretty much as far as I've ever gone with it. So that is an amazing strategy.
Thank you. Well, if it's any encouragement for anyone listening and for yourself too, to get on more podcasts, there is this really interesting stat that if someone lands on your website because they heard about you on a podcast, they are 7 times more likely to purchase from you than if they found your website any other way. So it's really, really powerful in terms of conversion. Yeah. Also, podcast listeners as a whole tend to be more well-educated and have more discretionary income, so higher household income. So especially in a tight economy like this, if you're really looking for people with spending power, do not underestimate the power of the audiences you reach through podcasting.
That's so great. Yes. So I know, Erin, I told you. I learned I learned so much from her.
No, you guys are too sweet.
I was going to recap something. Hold on.
Oh, wait, perfect water break. So think.
Oh, yeah. So basically, that because it builds trust and it has a higher conversion rate because it builds trust. There was one other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Awesome. I guess I'll just recap that thought. And then should we just talk about like in-person events and that you've been having and then kind of finish up with the one that you have coming up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy. Whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. There is the wait list still out for it?
It is. When does this episode air? Because the tickets might be live by then. Our tickets are probably going to drop at the very end of this month. So we're aiming for April 30th. It could be. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. All right. That sounds good. Yeah. And then we'll probably, because it's probably being after editing all my rambling, it'll probably be like 30 minutes or so.
Do you want me to dive any deeper into the media pitching side? I want to make sure it's valuable for your listeners. So if there's anything.
I also want them to buy it though, too.
Yeah. You're so sweet.
So I think it's good. I think there has been so much value in these other things you've talked about. Perfect. So so we don't need to sometimes I have to focus on one strategy with people, but you've already given so much value. So I don't need to do that. Okay. So I find that really valuable information to know, because you've already they already trust you after listening to a podcast featuring you. So that's
it's a very different relationship, right? Someone's listening to you in their ear for 30 minutes to 60 minutes. It's a completely different relationship than if they scroll past you on social. It's a hyper nurture. So someone can literally go from a cold stranger who has no idea who you are to a raving fan in the span of one episode.
Man, I love that. And you've always done public speaking and events, and I mean, I attend them when they're in Oregon. I mean, I know you fly all over, but I would love to hear a little bit about what you do for your live events and your speaking, and to see if there's anything coming up as well here in Oregon.
Well, thank you, first of all, for always being just the most supportive friend.
I'm a raving fan.
Right back at you. I love seeing your face in the crowd, and I love being part of your events too. I mean, just truly incredible. On the speaking side, so I do both. I host my own events, which I can talk about, a big one that we have upcoming in September in just a moment. But I also am a keynote speaker. And like you said, I travel all across the country speaking at different conferences on all sorts of different topics. So I love that part of my job and what I do. And in Oregon, actually, next month, the Monmouth Independence Chamber of Commerce is hosting a small business conference that I'm speaking at on email marketing. So if you're local, come hang out. I think it's May 30th.
Okay.
So I know tickets are live, and I'm sure if you just Googled, small business conference, Monmouth Independence, it'll come up. Yeah. So that's an upcoming event. But for our own event, so Cubicle to CEO has done smaller in-person workshops of like 50, 60 people in the past, but we're doing our first large scale event in September this year. And I'm so excited, a little nervous, but also just mostly really excited to bring together people. So it'll be near Corvallis, Oregon, literally just right outside Corvallis at this gorgeous outdoor, it's usually a wedding venue, but we're going to take it over.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's called Gardens at Riverside. And they have these 7 gorgeous different garden areas. So like an English style garden area, gazebo, Japanese styled garden. So it's so beautiful. So the theme is like garden party vibes. The event itself is called Bloom Together Business Soiree. So it'll be the event to end the summer season, September 4th in the evening. So 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We're going to have 200 tickets available. And it's all around community building. That's the theme of the day, and we're going to be having a live panel with speakers flying in from all over and a headlining speaker for a fireside chat, and very tactical, real strategies you can apply no matter what type of business you own on how to build community and how to leverage it to grow your business. So
oh my gosh,
I'm super excited to hear from our amazing speaker. Around then, if you go to cubicletoceo.co/events or /bloom together, try either one of those URLs. It should take you to our ticket page.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that would be worth traveling if you don't live in this area. I mean, just the value from listening to this podcast today is going to be changing some businesses and some lives. And so if you are able to come to Oregon or to Corvallis, that would be so worth it. I'm lucky to live here and
just a short drive away.
and also I do know your last event, the tickets sold out in a few days.
Yeah, it was like 48 hours. It was crazy. We listed it on like a Monday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon they were all gone. So so we're hoping we'll sell out quickly of the 200 tickets as well. But we do have friends flying. I already have like someone who lives in Texas that texted me the other day. She's like, I'm coming. I'm like, I booked my ticket. So I definitely think there will be a good mix of entrepreneurs from all across the state of Oregon and beyond. So
that's so exciting. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that and the speaker release and everything. But man, thank you so much for being here today. Oh my gosh. I always learn so much from you, and you're so inspiring. And
I could say all the same things about you, Jordan. So thank you. Thank you so much to Salem Business Journal. I'm just so happy that this type of show has come to our community and that we're reaching listeners beyond Salem too. I think the Entrepreneurship Club is just such a cool club to be part of. And I'm so just honored to get to chat with people like you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you SMI Real Estate and Clutch Industries for sponsoring this episode.
Thank you.